Okay, so we're going to talk about building graphical user interfaces today. The reason we're talking about this is because I would like for all of you to build a GUI front end for your individual culminating project. It should be lots of fun, um, as long as you don't make it too complicated. So I suggest you keep it simple. We're going to start off by looking at which layouts I'm going to be showing you guys. So the graphical user interface. I'm going to talk about a border layout, a grid layout, a flow layout, and a box layout. And there's two different types of box layouts that we'll look at. So the border layout has this type of setup. There's 5 different areas that you can use on the screen. If you don't use an area, it just automatically makes that spot small. So we'll go through it and you'll see how it works. The flow layout is very simple. As you add things to the screen, and these are just buttons, it just puts one right after the other and uses up the space it's got. Grid layout, every single cell is an identical size to all the others. So you say, I want how many rows? So here, 3 rows, and how many columns? And then this particular example, 2 columns. Every spot, every cell will be like a table with identical size to everything else. The box layout is pretty cool, and you can line it up either on the x-axis or the y-axis. So as you add components to your screen, to your what's called a panel, it will line them up horizontally or vertically, depending on what you've defined your box layout to be. Okay, so those are our layouts. How are you going to do it? You're going to use not just one layout, but you'll use several together in the same space. So this is what we're going to all build together. Okay, so the idea is not that this is what you're going to use in your project, but that you understand how to mix and match the different components that you're putting on panels, which are all defined as having a layout. If you look at this, you should see that there are different layouts, and there's one major one that the different panels are positioned on with their own layouts. Okay, so we've got J combo boxes, we've got J text fields, J text areas, J buttons, J labels. I'm going to show you radio buttons and check boxes as well. Okay, so these are all on their own panels, and the panels have their own layout defined. And I've colored the panels different colors so you can actually see that this is a north, south, east, west, and center layout, which is the border layout. Okay, looking at the north layout, which is the pink at the top, I've defined that as being a flow layout. So that's what the flow layout's going to look like. On the right-hand side is the east, and that's set up as a grid layout. It's got 3 different cells in it. I made the bottom one a J text area so you can see what a text area is as opposed to a text field. So the text field is one line, text area is several lines, and if your lines go past the space that's there, you get scroll bars. Okay, so the bottom is your south, and I've made that one kind of a turquoisey color. That's just a box layout along the x-axis. And what's nice about that is composed to the grid layout is that the components that you're putting there get the size that they need rather than all equal sizes. On the left is the west, and that I've made it blue. And there's a space in between the check boxes and the radio boxes, and I actually had to fill the space with a component. I made an empty label and put it there. So we'll walk through building this entire thing, and hopefully when we're done, you guys will have an idea of how to put your GUIs together, and you can start designing a GUI for what you're going to be doing for your project. And we'll talk about the project in a separate video. Okay, so here's the 5 different areas. All right. So our main layout here is the largest panel, which is the whole thing, the whole window. And the main layout is a border layout. So that's the north, south, east, west, and center. All right, so starting off, the way we're going to structure it is we're going to have 2 different classes. So the first class is just going to instantiate our border frame. That's going to be our window, our main window. And we're going to say, yep, we're going to have a window. I'm calling it border frame because it is a border layout. Um, that's kind of a dumb name to call it for your projects. You're going to come up with your own name because you are going to match a good name with what your project's all about. Okay. So the other thing, this thing here, set default close operation, that is a line of code you have to put in, which will actually end the program. Because if you click on the X in the top right of your window and you think you're done, your program's over, it's not. Your program's still running. You have to actually put a line of code in there to say if they X out of the window, they actually stop the program. So that's why the second line of code is there. So this everything we're doing to build this window is done in the constructor. So the constructor has all the lines of code to put together all the components, all the buttons, the radio buttons, the check boxes, the text areas, all the stuff on your screen gets put together in your constructor. So the constructor not only sets values for variables for an object, but if your object has a GUI front end, it actually builds that as well. Okay, so what do you see here? We are starting off by getting an identifier so that we can put things onto our JFrame. So the identifier we're getting is the content pane. It's the whole panel. It's the content pane which actually we are casting as a J panel. And then we're going to say we want a border layout. And then once we've got our identifier for our panel, and it's defined as a border layout, we have to create components that we want to see there. All we're putting on our border layout is panels. All those buttons and labels and everything you see there are not on our main frame. They are on their own individual panels, which are placed on the main frame. Okay, so we're going to create 5 panels and we're going to position them on our content pane. Okay, so we have a north panel, south panel, east panel, west panel, and center panel. And I do suggest you use those names so you don't get lost because there's going to be a fair bit of code building each of those panels. Okay, this very last section you see here, place this J-frame in the center of the screen. If you don't go through finding the dimension of your screen based off of the resolution that you've got, and actually doing the math and setting the location, then every single time you run your program, your J panel is going to show up in the top left corner and it gets kind of annoying. It's a lot nicer to have it come up in the middle of your screen. So I'm going to say, I want this size of a J panel. I want it located in this spot in the center. And now let's see it. Let's make it visible. So that's everything that we're starting with. Okay, so I'm just going through, note the casting. Here we're creating the panels, placing the panels. Yep, talked about all this. Okay, it should compile. You run the program. Not very impressive. You just have a basic panel. You can't tell that you've built 5 panels and placed them onto your J-frame. You can't tell. Okay, so it's not very impressive. So we're going to start by changing some of the attributes so we can actually see the panels. So north, south, east, west, and center. I'm going to add this in the middle, right in the position you see. So after we've made the J panels, I'm going to give some attributes to each of them. So the set the background color, I came up with a color with RGB. You can come up with your own colors. If you just Google Java RGB new color, then you can pick a color and whatever numbers it gives you for the red, green, and blue, you can put them in and you can have your new color and set the background. Uh, I decided to show you what it's like to make a border for your panel. So the south panel, or the north panel rather, sorry, the pink one, I made a black line around, box around the whole thing, and that's how you do it, set border. All I did with the south, so the one on the bottom was made that turquoisey color. The one on the right-hand side, I made a different type of border. I gave it a title, so that's a title border. And I decided to show you how to set preferences to give it an actual dimension. Um, if one of the numbers doesn't work, like the 400 may not work with what I said the actual size is, it'll come up with its own number for that. But this does work fairly well. Set preferred size. West panel, the one on the left, I just gave it this kind of purpley color. And center panel is kind of the orangey color. So now you can see the panels. All right. Now we're going to work on the north panel. And I'm wondering how much of this to go through today. I think that might be enough to get you guys started. If you have that done for the week, that should be good. And we'll start next week, I guess, with the north panel, and I'll work through setting up the north panel and the south panel, or 2 or 3 of the panels for next week. And if you want to work ahead, this PowerPoint will be available to you, and you can go for it. Or if you want to get caught up, again, you can listen to the video and work through the PowerPoint. Okay, so if you have any problems, let me know. You can either click on the chat through the email, because I'm almost always sitting at my computer during school hours, and unless I'm taking a quick break, which means I will be back very shortly. And so you can always get help. And what I'm planning to do is have trivia game Fridays by teams, and I'd like you guys to get a team for that. And um, then on Fridays, I'll put something on the Google Classroom, watch for it, and it should be a lot of fun. It's going to be focused on the programming of Java. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. If I can figure out how to stop sharing.